provided for procedure.
On the whole, although the process of decongesting the nation's prisons remains a continuous process, there cannot be any doubt that a solid foundation has been laid through the activities of the Presidential Committee to help reform our criminal justice system by rejigging the nation's correctional institutions.
Can we have your menu booklet, please?
Madam, we know they sell book for here. See, our food, see our food.
Like you don't have a menu? So how am I supposed to know what to order for or what to eat?
Who the heck recommended this rat hole of a hooker for you?
Who can you want? What do you want? Oh my God! Who is that lousy woman and why are you screaming to the rooftop?
Stand up for me and get out! You just said this place is our place.
Please don't let that.
What are you waiting for? Come here! Come! Take out!
No, they hear what?
Issues in the sports sector remain one of the most debated among Nigerians.
Collective responsibility to make the world a better, safer, and more peaceful one.
Nigeria's permanent representative elected president of the 74th General Assembly of the United Nations.
Thank you very much to those of you who suffered quietly supporting me. And I assure you that I will continue to do my best.
As Muslims mark Eid al-Fitr, President Buhari reached his commitment to improving lives of Nigerians.
And Nigerians observe Eid al-Fitr peacefully across the nation.
And Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our assessment of 20 years of uninterrupted democratic governance in Nigeria.
And we should also discuss Nigeria's selection as the president of the 74th General Assembly of the United Nations. All right, let's begin, of course, with the editions of Good Morning Nigeria, in which we have devoted time to assess the journey so far as it affects 20 years of uninterrupted democratic experience here in Nigeria.
Indeed, Claire, our viewers will recall that we've had a number of guests who shared their views on how democracy has improved the living standards of Nigerians or otherwise since 1999 when military rule came to an end.
And of course, there were submissions of our guests. Of course, they have been as diverse as their backgrounds and experiences. Now, some of them are political actors that played one role or the other in the journey of the last 20 years.
Now, this morning, we, of course, return to the subject matter with a conversation on Nigeria's democratic journey 20 years on by engaging another set of guests who will, of course, give us their perspectives as we begin the countdown to June 12, which is now the New Democracy Day.
And you also recall that previous guests on this program raised several points as to how democracy, has impacted on the people in various sectors of the economy. But the question will be, what is the future of democracy in Nigeria, going by what has transpired in the last 20 years?
Obviously, we'll get fresh perspectives today from our guests. And also on the program, we shall take a look at the election of Professor Tijani Mohammed Bande, Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, as the president of the 74th UN General Assembly.
Indeed, yet another milestone for Nigeria as it assumes the responsibility of presiding over the UN General Assembly, consisting of virtually most nations of the world. Now, it will be the second time since the General Joseph Garba held that position in 1989, and that was when he chaired the 44th session.
Now, one question to ask immediately is, what does this mean with regard to Nigeria's diplomatic credentials? And how will this also assist Nigeria in leveraging our international goodwill to help address domestic and global challenges? We shall find out in our conversation segment subsequently. My name is Kingsley Osadolo. Good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria, being broadcast as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. It's a live broadcast, and Barka de Salah one more time to our Muslim faithful.
Of course, Kingsley, Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim brothers and sisters. And as always, it's our pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria. I am Claire Adilabu Abdul Razak, and as always, we will hopefully bring you the other part of the program that will include newspaper review. We'll be joined by Atoibe later on. There'll be business, and we'll look at sports and, foreign and arts and entertainment will always take the rear of the program. But right now, Nolin Abel Ame is in the news studio to bring us the morning news. Hello, Nolin.
Hello, Claire. Good morning. Compliment of the season. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the early morning news. Muslim faithful in Nigeria Tuesday converged on their various places of worship to perform the congregational prayers of Thanksgiving, marking the end of the month-long Ramadan fast, and President Muhammadu Buhari was among those who worshipped at Mambila Barracks Eid Ground in Abuja, Nigeria's capital.
Oh Allah, may we learn to honor and enjoy our diversity and differences as a people, even as we more deeply touch our fundamental unity. Oh Allah, may we as a nation be guided by your divine guidance to rediscover the sacred flame of our national heritage, which so many have given their lives to safeguard.
And in the spirit of the Eid al-Fitr celebrations, the FCT community is reassuring President Muhammadu Buhari of continued support, cooperation and understanding as he strives to implement the next level agenda for sustainable future of the country.
Thank you very much, those of you who suffered quietly supporting me, and I assure you that I will continue to do my best.
The country is destined for greatness, and I know that the Almighty God will lead us to that greatness.
Similarly, the president has expressed confidence in the genuine commitment of Nigerian women towards safeguarding the nation's democracy, promising to accommodate more women in the current political dispensation. This came to light when a cross-section of Nigerian women paid Salah homage to the president at the presidential villa, Abuja.
I think the biggest trust any leadership will show, whether it's a household, a town or a country, is to give the treasury to the women. Since I came, women are in charge of the treasury. So I don't think it's not the number of workers employed, but the fundamentals of who holds the bag.
There were also prayers across the country as Muslims celebrated the Eid al-Fitr.
Remind them, responsibility of every Muslim that fasted, you have to give out zakatul fitr.
We don't have to curse our leaders. We have to pray for them.
Nigeria's Professor Tijani Muhammad Bande has been named the 74th President of the United Nations Assembly. The announcement was made at the UN Assembly Hall in New York.
Implementation of existing mandates and the 2030 agenda, with particular focus on peace and security, poverty eradication, zero hunger, quality education, climate action and inclusion will constitute the major priority of my presidency. As the United Nations has not met the expectations of its founding fathers in terms of preventing many violent conflicts and mass atrocities, we have to assume collective responsibility to make the world a better, safer, and more peaceful one.
And on security, the Zamfara state government has appealed for the deployment of more troops to identified black spots in the state. The state governor, Bello Mohammed Mutawali, made the appeal when he received the representative of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, on operational visit.
We have a major problem in between Bori to Faru up to Talata Mofana. It's a brand new road that is unaccessible road for now because bandit has already taken over that areas.
That's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Claire and Kinsley after this break. Thank you for watching.
One Football Confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hot Sports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Nigeria's premier sports production and marketing group, Hot Sports, partners with the biggest, the largest, and the #1 television network in Africa, the NTA, to give Nigerians a memorable viewing experience. Boost fan support for the Super Eagles to glory in Egypt. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
It's Ramadan. It's okay to share what you love. Ramadan Kareem from Indomie. Indomie Super Pack now available at 85 Naira.
The general public is hereby invited to the unveiling ceremony of a historical exhibition in pictures, arts and immersive environment as part of activities lined up to mark the 2019 Democracy Day commemoration. The exhibition with the theme Unbroken Democracy is scheduled to take place as follows. Date 7th June 2019. Venue International Conference Center, ICC. Time 4:30 p.m. Please note, the exhibition will remain open to the public until June 12, 2019. Boss Mustafa, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, announcer.
The Aerial Assurance Challenge.
Oh, thank you. But what assurance can you give our daughter?
Everything. With the new look Aerial, I can even do the laundry.
Prove it then.
Okay. stain even tougher. Now, let's wash the cloth with your detergent and with New Look Ariel. Do you believe me now?
Ariel, now in a New Look pack.
Television studio lighting requires skills which can only be acquired through professional training. NTA TV College JOS therefore invites engineers and technical officers in public and private television stations to a special 4-week course on television studio lighting. Date 10th June to 5th July 2019. Course fee 100,000 naira only per participant. Accommodation fees inclusive. Venue NTA TV College, Rayfield, JOS. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of television studio lighting, operation of studio lighting equipment, and the profound effect of lighting on television broadcast. For more enquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
All right, now it's time for us to take some business news with the latest report from the World Bank indicating that global economic growth is forecast to ease to a weaker 2.6% in 2019 before inching up to 2.7% in year 2020. This and more on business news with our correspondent, Chimaobi Walter Nanji.
In its mid-year global economic prospect, the Global Apex Bank projects that growth in emerging markets and developing economies is expected to stabilize in 2020 as some countries move past periods of financial strain. Meanwhile, the bank noted that for sub-Saharan Africa, growth is expected to accelerate to 3.3% in 2020, assuming that investor sentiment towards some of the large economies of the region improves. The World Bank did indicate that per capita GDP is expected to rise in the region. It will nevertheless be insufficient to significantly reduce poverty. In 2020, growth in Angola is anticipated to pick up to 2.9%. Growth in Nigeria is anticipated to edge up to 2.2%, and growth in South Africa is anticipated to rise to 1.5%. In other stories, the financial markets are closed for business today, Tuesday and Wednesday for Eid al-Fitr celebrations. The Nigerian equities market maintained a bearish outing on Monday, having opened the week with a loss of 0.45%. The bearish trend was on the back of losses witnessed in highly capitalized equities. On how the Nigerian Stock Exchange has fared so far, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Oscar Onyema, described the market as resilient.
I have to say that the market has proven itself to be extremely resilient, given the kind of volatility that we've seen from 2015, the 2016 economic downturns, and recovery in 2017, and 2018 being like a midway year, if you will, as people got ready for elections. The market, in all, has handled it well. And this is in a context where we're still trying to rebuild trust.
With business news, I'm Chimaobi Walter Naji.
All right, thank you for the, of course, business package. Next is newspaper review.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe, is right here with us on the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Claire.
I'm sure you're still in the Eid mood.
Yes, so it's still Barakah de Salam.
Absolutely. You're welcome. All right, let's begin by taking a look at the Punch, which is the first paper that we have. Obviously, as you would expect, there are photographs from the Eid al-Fitr celebrations yesterday. As you can see, it's a cross-section of Muslim faithful during the Eid al-Fitr celebration that took place at Ilezik in Ikeja, Lagos. That was yesterday. That's one of the photographs. Another photograph there showing the celebrations in Abuja location, another one in Abuja, and the other, of course, from Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. That's somewhere at Ibafo. Well, the lead story is a return to Abuja. It says, reactions as UK seizes fresh 82 billion naira Abacha loot. Reactions as UK seizes fresh 82 billion naira Abacha loot. Details can be found on page 3. Now, 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate of the Punch. Speakership, that's the kicker. CUPP rejects Gbajabiamila Miller and drags him to court for alleged perjury. That's page 19. And PDP NWC, that's the National Working Committee, meets lawmakers-elect Thursday and Friday. That's this week. Details can be found on page 18. About the nameplate of the Punch, we have 4 headlines. NLC, that's Labour Congress, and experts lambaste federal government over high rail projects cost. Details on page 25. Corrupt customs officers and smugglers killing local rice production, page 2. APC says Oyegun condoned indiscipline as party chairman, that's page 19. And alleged 3.4 billion naira fraud, anti-graft agency recommends Emir of Kano's suspension. And right at the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper, you have 3 headlines there. Goodwill messages on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, Otom Abdul Razak Fayami, others greet Muslims, and Niger man kills neighbor for making advances to his wife. And 2 men arraigned for molesting 10-year-old in Katsina. Federal government begins 2020 budget preparation and warns against inflating costs. Page 25, Claire.
Yeah, let's look at Daily Trust now. And I'll begin just a little below the nameplate. Nigeria-US jersey to share Abacha's £210 million. And Buhari, why I must secure FCT despite voting for PDP. NACA processes 27 applications from prospective carriers. And the lead story, APC crisis or Shomole Oyegun trade blame for defeat in 5 states. And one of those picture stories Kingsley talked about, emanating from, of course, the Eid celebrations. And there you see the Emir of Kano and the Kano State Governor exchanging pleasantries. Now, stories trending at the bottom of the paper. Buhari has capacity to end insecurity. That's attributed to IBB. The details of that you can find on page 4. Nigeria's Professor Bande emerges anger president, page 3. And Salah, governors charge Nigerians on peaceful coexistence. That's the outlook of the Daily Trust. And we return to Bayo. Which of the stories?
Yes, let's start with Eid. And of course, because Eid was across the nation yesterday.
And peacefully too.
Yes, report is emphasizing the fact that it was marked all across the country peaceably. And particularly so that, particularly in the northeast, vehicular movement were restricted in Maiduguri and parts of Yobe, but there were no ugly incidents. However, imams at the praying centers or at the Eid grounds enjoyed increased prayers and devotion for peace. They also called for peaceful coexistence as a catalyst for socio-economic development. The other report you read, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, says that he is confident in the ability of President Buhari to address the lingering security challenges in the country. He added that he argued that Nigerians should be patient with President Buhari. He says the president is not disposed to idle talk, and therefore Nigerians should hold Buhari by his words, adding that the resurging insecurity is only a temporary setback. He called on Nigerians to rally round and shun divisive tendencies. The spirit of togetherness, he says, must be sustained by all if the nation must move forward. There were also messages from the traditional thrones. The Emir of Zaza, Alhaji Shehu Idris, enjoined his subjects in the emirate to resort to embrace farming elaborately as a means of enhancing their economic growth and that of the nation. He urged the federal and state governments to provide farm inputs to assist farmers in this year's farming season. Also from Benin, Oba of Benin, Owari II, has called on Nigerians to pray for their leaders. He said in his message that we should pray for our political, religious, and traditional rulers for Allah's wisdom to lead them and the country and her people to peace, unity, progress, and development. He said that the moment in our nation now calls for collective effort to surmount insecurity and enhance economic development of our nation and of the people. The other good news also came from the United Nations. Nigeria's Tijani Mohamed Bande has emerged the president of the 74th UN General Assembly. He is to assume that position in September. He was the sole candidate at the election and was so nominated by acclamation by the 87th plenary at New York. Professor Mohamed Bande is Nigeria's permanent representative of the UN, and his ascendance to the position of the UN is quite significant because the UN General Assembly is the only body with a universal representative for all nations, and its function primarily is to discuss, debate, and make recommendations by way of resolutions as issues pertaining to international peace, security, and development. He is not the first Nigerian to preside over the UNGA. The first was actually, you remember him? Nigeria's Major General Joseph Garba, late now. He was then Foreign Minister for Nigeria, and he was president of the 44th session between 1989 and 1990. In his acceptance speech, Professor Mohamed Bande thanked the federal government for nominating him and the African group also of the UN for endorsing his candidacy. He promised openness, inclusivity, as well as transparency. So that's another feather in the cap of Nigeria. And it's coming at a significant time when very soon there will be consideration about increasing the membership in the Security Council.
All right, that's very significant. Professor Mohamed Bande, of course, is a man of many achievements. He was Vice-Chancellor of Usman Dan Fodio University. Yes. And he was also Director General of NIPS, that is the Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. And for many years, he was a visiting member of the editorial board of the Guardian newspapers. So he's a very well-respected academic, professor of political science, and all of that. But there's a story on the Abacha loot. I just wondered, Bayo, yes, shall we ever get to the bottom of the Abacha loot? It's 21 years this month since Abacha died. And ever since, there have been revelations. I mean, during the first few months of General Abdulsalami Abubakar's administration, after he succeeded Abacha, part of the reforms that the family was said to have made was some 64 billion naira. Yes. That was in 1998. And since then, we'll be hearing of several millions of, hundreds of millions of naira from the Swiss government, and this is another latest tranche.
This latest one is was published by a British daily, the Metro, and it says that the sum is about 211 million pounds, equivalent to about 82 billion naira by Nigeria's standard. And it is alleged that the money was laundered to a Channel Island bank through the United States, and it was believed and alleged to belong to the late General Sani Abacha. The sum have been recovered, but it is with the British government. The Metro reports that the money is being held until the Jersey, USA, and Nigeria can reach agreement. And therefore, there's prospect that at least if Nigeria moves along with Jersey, United States, and the British government,
the money will be shared.
There will be discussions about how to repatriate the money back. But sometime of recent, they have developed a condition by stipulating the projects of or what the money will be used for. There is a strategy to ensure that money laundered is not re-laundered.
Money looted.
What I'm not sure, the Daily Trust, in a version of that story, is saying that Nigeria, US, and Jersey, that's the band, to share the money. I don't understand that.
Well, that's part of what may happen going forward. I mean, let's face it, it's 211 million pounds in the first instance. the money has been there for, Abacha died in 1998, so presumably let's assume that he put the money in there on the eve of his passing. So that's of 21 years. So that money should have been working for whoever was in possession of it. So the money had been yielding a lot of dividends, you know, for whoever was in possession of it. Now, to retrieve that money, it's going to cost us a lot of resources, because you have to engage negotiators. You engage negotiators. And, you know, the fact is that once somebody has custody of your assets, the person has, of course, the person has the upper hand.
And it dictates the terms.
Absolutely. But the part of my concern is, do we have a sense of, you know, what went on in terms of the pillaging of the financial resources of this country during the Abacha years?
Well, things that are done in secrecy, not in the open. Certainly, nobody can put a hand on what the quantum is. Is as the revelations come, we begin to tally up, and then.
That's right.
Let's hope this is the end. If it is not, if more comes, then the Nigeria will make it a priority to ensure that they are repatriated.
And then you would just ask us, those who were around at the time and who knew what was going on, how many new refineries the loot, you know, could have built at the time? You know, how many kilometers of standard gauge railway lines, you know, the loot could have built? Or, for instance, how many power stations? You know, there were no power plants built during that time. All right, Bayo, that's...
You have
the I have the editorial, and it's from Daily Sun newspaper, and it's at page 15. Blacklisting chronic bank debtors. This is fairly straightforward in terms of the headline and in terms of what it's saying.
Yes. Well, blacklisting chronic bank debtors is the challenge to chief executive of banks. And not only that, not because they want to recover their bad debts, but they are worried because they say security agencies are at their back, and therefore they now have put pressure on them. And so the chief executives at their last meeting said that they are now compelled, they promised that they are going to provide a list of such bad debtors, and they will share it among banks. And the initiative is to ensure that you don't run from one bank and then go and get loans from other banks. And secondly, they want to make sure that they put their collective hands on deck to ensure that the law enforcement agencies have a list of the persons and any criminal activities that are supposed to follow from that debt can be pursued, so that they too can have some reprieve from the pressure from the security agencies. They also say that the non-performing loans have amounted to about 1 trillion, and if this is not handled properly, it could lead into another distress into the banking industry. And therefore, they are now also urging that government should ensure that those persons that have been involved in this chronic debt are not allowed to have dealings with ministries, departments, and agencies. Therefore, you deny them access to potential contracts and activities.
Yeah, if you recall, some years ago, there was naming and shaming of bank debtors, whereby the names of some debtors, the names were published, but it generated a lot of controversy because there were names that were included, and those persons protested. But it's useful to have a register of chronic debtors, and there must be ways of dealing with those chronic debtors. But critically, for banks themselves, this has to do with their management of credit. Who are their credit officers? What kind of training do they have? Yeah, I mean, because actually bad debts can cripple a financial institution. So if there is no due diligence before these loans are advanced to these so-called chronic debtors, some of them, you find them living big and large all over the place, what then happens? So the banks have to look inwards and see what their credit guidelines are before advancing credit, to these so-called credit debtors.
It's part of the pressure that has been compiled. Of recent, AMCON too is at their back. Some of the banks had some what do you call it, widow's mite to keep them afloat, and therefore AMCON is at their beck and call, asking for refund, and that's why they must do something about this.
All right, Bayo, thank you. That should be all we have time for today. There are other issues, of course, involving the banks. Talk about contract workers hitting record high of over 46,000, staff and all that. But Bayo,
I'm sorry, Bayo is going now. Just to mention that in passing, the old familiar disease with Nigerian football is back. They said the Flying Eagles players were protesting that they were not going to vacate their hotels because they had not been paid their bonuses. They were supposed to have left yesterday, but they didn't leave their hotel rooms.
All right, we'll be back. We'll be right back. Don't go away. This is Good Morning Nigeria.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
One football confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hot Sports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women, and it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
All right, you're welcome back, and let's say Good Morning Nigeria live for the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we informed you earlier, Nigeria is to lead the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly from September this year. This, of course, follows the unanimous election of Nigeria's permanent rep to United Nations, that's Ambassador Tijani Mohammed Bande. The election took place yesterday in New York. Now, we have joining us via Skype this morning to discuss the development, Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President of Media and Publicity. Malam Garba, pleasure to have you with us. We know it's small hours in New York at this time, 5 hours behind us, but give us a sense of what transpired yesterday at the United Nations.
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity. The sound is a bit scrappy, but the sense I make of your question is what happened yesterday and how did it go? I want to say that Nigeria recorded a major milestone in international affairs yesterday. Yes, it is true that we had been there before. About 30 years ago, the 44th session was led by the late Major General Joseph Garba as Nigeria's permanent representatives. But the important thing is that 30 years after we are back here, an indication that we have recovered lost mileage all over again, and Nigeria's greatness, Nigeria's power, Nigeria's influence in the international community has come back all over again. The choice of Bande by this country and his posting is recognized. It's as something that is working well, for the country. We have seen how barely 2 years in the office, this gentleman, a scholar, a researcher, and an administrator had blended so well in the United Nations. He has become so part of the system. He received a standing ovation yesterday, upon his own election. He was literally on first name terms with virtually everyone, about 200 national representatives, on the floor. So therefore, it is to say that we have got effectiveness of our own international relations back in place, and our influence is back all over again as a major influence in international affairs.
All right, Malam Garba Shehu, thank you very much, and Eid Mubarak to you. Given the fact that, the election of His Excellency, of course, we know the unanimity of the acclamation. The delegation sent by the president, what kind of support did they provide?
Well, you know that it is important that that there seems to be this connection between what our representative here is doing and his home government. As members of this delegation, we were given front row seats, literally speaking, and recognition was offered by the outgoing president, indicating that for Nigeria, this is a very important international moment. Much of the work had been done preceding, yes, the arrival in 48 hours before the election by this delegation. Much of it is owed, as I said, to the effectiveness of Nigeria's ambassador on the ground. But we had this country had quietly worked with all of the international groups, given assurances that there would be inclusivity in our leadership of the United Nations. So in effect, our presence here is symbolic, is to show that the entire Nigerian nation is behind this very successful ambassador who is effective in the United Nations.
Well, Malam Garba Shehu, you're part of the president's delegation to the General Assembly, to the UN. What was the president's reaction upon learning that it was a done deal with the election of Professor Muhammad Bande?
Well, I would not say that there was any shock or surprise, because this had been anticipated. As I said, a lot of work had been done prior to this day. It couldn't be that Professor Bande would himself be alone on the stage if we hadn't achieved consensus first on the African continent, because this position was zoned to Africa. It's a rotatory, responsibility. Once it came to Africa and Nigeria raised her hand, then of course, from country to country, our diplomats lobbied everyone. So what was the president? The president was extremely happy and delighted, and going forward, certainly the president would be making a statement when he receives Professor Bande in the coming days or weeks. Bande would clear a few things here, and certainly will be eager to come home to report to Mr. President.
All right, we would like for you to give us an insight, because the outgoing president, that's of course the 73rd president, Espinosa, as well as the UN Secretary General, all welcomed the 74th president with such glowing words as outstanding, and of course having a wealth of experience as a scholar and as a political scientist and all that. But specifically, the president talked about the fact that he was coming at such a critical time in the life of the UN. Can you give us an insight what the UN 74th UNGA might be, the weight of responsibility on this new president?
Well, you know that the essence of the General Assembly is that it represents the aspirations and the moral authority of all nations of the world. And so therefore, it's been effective in doing a lot of things, determining, international agenda would then be a key part of this gentleman's responsibility. If you are the leader, you have, before coming to the office, campaigned and issued a statement of intent, using which you have canvassed for support among all of the delegations. So you have a clear indication that this is where you want to drive the UN system, the direction in which you want to drive the UN system in terms of the pursuit of the objectives of the UN and the challenges that the UN itself, faces. Take, for examples, matters that may look, for a song that can be taken for granted. Bande had spoken about education, not because he has a background of being a scholar or a teacher. Things like primary education, for many nations, especially on our own continent and among our own populations, access to primary education itself is not even there. And there's a need to bring international awareness to some of these things so that there is an understanding that these are things that are taken for granted, in other nations. So he has this very important role to bring international spotlight to bear on matters that are important to Nigeria, that are important to the African continent, while in effect carrying along with him, the international community in doing this.
All right, Malaga Bashir, thank you very much. But still on the issues, from your own journalistic background, quite aside from what you have ticked off as the addition of what the president-elect might bring on to the UN General Assembly from September, some analysts are already saying that in addition to terrorism, violent extremism, issues of poverty and climate change, that we also have to be on the lookout, for instance, to the ongoing spat between the U.S. and China. What are likely to be the trickle-down consequences of that in terms of the trade war? And, of course, Iran is there, and North Korea is also there. So it looks like his plate will be full.
Well, Professor Bande has spoken very strongly on an important issue. The UN system is supposed to operate on the basis of inclusiveness and multilateralism. Yes, over the years, nations have tended to think and act alone, dealing with international matters, and some of these have come with consequences. But it has been proven over time that where there is the coming together of all nations to decide and take decisions on this matter, multilateralism, where multilateralism rules the day, there are likely to be consequences such as war that can break out. So Professor Bande is conscious of this, as you have said yourself, given his scholarship and understanding and background that he brings to this job, we are likely to see him driving the UN system in a direction that brings countries together rather than nations going apart and acting alone.
All right, let's quickly look at the issue. If you look at some of the issues that the incoming president, noted, issues of, terrorism and all that, most of those are encapsulated in the Sustainable Development Goals. But beyond that, and looking globally, the General Assembly is also, getting more powers now because of the controversies, of course, that come with issues of vetoing at the Security Council. Nigeria is aspiring to become a member of the Security Council. Is this also on the table for him?
Oh, you know that the issue of reforming the UN system has been an ongoing discussion. Again, while there are some nations, including Nigeria, who wish to see a speedier movement in that direction, obviously driven by our own aspiration to be in that, exclusive club, there are also nations that are slowing it down. So again, there is a need to give impetus and drive to this. And yes, Professor Bande has given all the assurances. And look, Bande is one of the most, from what we've seen, is one of the most respected, ambassadors in the United Nations today. And there's so much hope in him that on this particular issue that you have raised, that he is going to move it. It may not be complete within his own time, but this issue of reform is key on the items he wishes to pursue, and we would see a further momentum and enhancement of the process. Who knows whether this can be concluded while he's under his own presidency.
Well, Malagaba Shehu, you've accompanied President Buhari to the United Nations on a number of occasions and indeed other international fora. And one of the many issues that the president has often raised has to do with the proceeds of corruption and how the receivers of Nigeria's stolen wealth, could be prevailed upon to repatriate those looted assets without further preconditions. But of course, we know how the global financial system works. The UN itself already has an agency dealing with drugs and corruption, but it remains, a challenging issue how to retrieve those assets that are already in the custody of the receiving state. Is this a matter that Nigeria would like to push under the presidency of Professor Bande?
In a nutshell, yes, you are absolutely correct there, because Professor Bande is there as an encapsulation. He represents the aspirations of Nigeria. He represents the aspirations of the continent of Africa. I think this is the very essence of this. The General Assembly does not have power to pass binding resolutions, unlike the Security Council. However, the moral weight of such resolutions are such that they tie you to, they compel actions in many instances. So I don't want to be seen to be underrating what other nations think or trying to insult the sensibilities of other countries, but it is logical to assume that there is going to be a direct linkage between Nigeria's aspirations on the international scene, the aspirations of the African continent, and the day-to-day running of the presidency of the UN by Professor Bande beginning in September. So yes, this is an issue that is important to Nigeria. This is an issue that would be spotlighted, would be highlighted by the Bande presidency, and we hope that it will take us forward.
All right, Malam Garba Shehu, let's allow you to go take some rest now. Of course, there'll be so much more to talk about when you and the delegation return back to Nigeria. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, I appreciate.
All right, that was Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, joining us via Skype live from New York. This is Good Morning Nigeria. If you're just joining us, topic next is looking at 20 years of unbroken democracy for Nigeria. We'll be right back.
Television College Jos announces admissions into 2-year diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos.
On payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA TV College. Applicants can also obtain the forms through the NTA TV College portal at www.ntatvc.edu.nj.
Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803-3144-383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar, Announcer.
Move now! The red light won't kill you. Move now!
To they disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say, I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back from wherever you're watching. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live here in Abuja. Let's listen into Victor Azuz's background report as, of course, we begin our conversation on 20 years of Nigeria's unbroken democracy.
We've seen that government is now answerable to the people that put them there. Because the military were not answerable to the people. In fact, some of them will tell you that they are not here through the will of the people, so they are not answerable. They just did their best to respond to the will of the people. But now we have a government that is there which comports its affairs in accordance with the rule of law and constitutionalism, which we didn't have before. And the fact that we are operating under a constitution has a lot of implications. For instance, freedom, which people have, fair trial, fair hearing, absence of restriction of freedom of movement, and so forth and so on, which were abridged, very much abridged under the military rule.
Over the years, you have seen that they are enthusiastic in electing their leaders. They enjoy the opportunity to elect their leaders. They love the fact that they have a say in who rules them. And they can ask questions. They do ask questions, which was not possible under the experience we've had in Nigeria. So I believe that Nigerians prefer democracy, and they will also love to see it grow until it gets to where they really want it to be.
Nigeria has enjoyed democracy, but there are various room for improvement, and those improvements can level very clearly in terms of education, in terms of power supply, in terms of ensuring there is gainful employment for the Nigerians, and then transforming the economy in such a way that Nigerians will feel that there is governance for the people. Meanwhile, I think democracy is so good for Nigerians.
All right, now those were excerpts from our last conversation on 20 years of democracy in Nigeria. That's 1999 to 2019. We have guests with us at the studios as well as at one of our network centers, and we're getting another guest via Skype. Let's welcome Alhaji Shitu Kabir Mohammed. Alhaji Kabir Mohammed is the pioneer chairman of the Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC, and also was a presidential candidate in this year's general elections. Madam Kabir Mohammed, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Also here with us in the studios, we would like to welcome Abdullahi Mustafa. Abdullahi Mustafa, of course, is a Nigerian in diaspora. He lives in Manchester in the United Kingdom. Abdullahi Mustafa, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning. Okay. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Kesley. All right, let's bring in Professor Deng Pang Shah, a political scientist at the University of Jos. Prof, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
All right, Kinsley.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I mean, as you heard from our introduction, we are looking at 20 years of unbroken democratic governance in Nigeria. From your perspective, what have been the gains and what have been the pains?
20 years of democratic now in Nigeria, we would say the gain here is that we have been able for the first time after some 3 consecutive regimes, we've been able to now put up as a democratic process that has been everlasting. At least we haven't got it to 20 years that we have today. And it has already, Nigerians are known today that there is no other alternative to governance than the democratic process. 20 years down line, we couldn't have, if it is in those days, after election, what people calls for is military, instead of going into litigations. Rather, they will call for military incursion. 20 years down the line, we have seen that the military have been relegated back to the barrack. And it has been in the conscience of Nigerians that it is time that democratic process is to be enhanced. Though some people will say we are still nascent democracy, I believe that we have gone now beyond nascent. What we just need is to now enhance the process by putting up some legislatives that will help to broaden the democratic space and allow inclusiveness as it is. For I will say that all the indices that help democratic process has been put in place. You find out that with even the judgment of Zamfara and Co., you see that judiciary are independent. You see that the issue of checks and balances is it's been done. The judiciary, the executives, and the legislatures, you see this, how robust it has been this last 8 to 12 years into the democratic process. The judiciary are like watchdog, and they are independent. And you see that the legislators are also on their own, like watchdog. And executive are put on their toes. And I believe that Nigerian has come to embrace democracy, and no military will take risk today of incursion into this democratic process. They know that Nigerian will rise against them.
All right, let's put you on hold, Malam Kabir Shitu, and bring in Professor Dung Pang Shah, who is a political scientist from our Jos Network Center. Prof, I'd like for you, Malam Kabir here has, of course, set the background. He said, of course, we're no longer growing, that Nigeria's democracy has come of age. The indices, for democratic institution are there. But without begging the question, have we mastered the art?
Well, I think we should thank all Nigerians who have really stood by and who have really worked, for the experience that we've had, 20 years, 19, 20 years now. After the military withdrew, I agree with him that citizens have been the ones that have really kept the process going. Each time elections are organized, they're out there in the rains and the sun and voting and casting their votes, for leaders to emerge. So I think that we need to congratulate ourselves. The second point I think we should note as Nigerians is that we have heard, at least now, institutions that have grown, established and are now growing. Political parties are there, the parliament is there, the judiciary, like he said, is working, the legislature is also working. But I think we need to do more evaluation, and the performance of these institutions, and even the behaviors, of actors, in these institutions. For us to make a very good judgment of where we are today and where we are expected, to be. Are we really slow in developing, or we are rapidly developing, or we're not developing at all? Several reports have been written on global democracy, and Nigeria has not been left out of it. Some have seen democracy as, a process that is at a standstill. Some say we are retreating, from the successes that were made initially. Some even say that we are in a political recession, meaning that we are not making headway, and that benefits and steps that we had taken, forward steps that we've taken, were regressing. And I think that it's something that we need to reflect on very carefully. For me, we may argue that there has been too much politics with too little democracy. And what I mean by that is that probably we may argue that we have our constitutions, without constitutionalism. And what that means is that we have a document that we call the Constitution, but we're not practicing this. We're not following the rules and regulations that are contained, in this Constitution. Some would also argue, and I would also agree with that we have political parties, but they're not politicking. Political parties have been created, and what we all know what political parties do in Nigeria, especially those that have not really been pushful in contesting elections and looking for political positions. Some of them are just formed, for transactional purposes, to get recognition and to get contracts, from governments in office, whether at the local government or states or federal level. So these political parties are not really politicking in a manner that will, help Nigerians, to grow. After all, some of us argue that we need political parties to be formed, but this is not the kind of political parties that we need in Nigeria. They must be up and doing in moving this country forward. They must be up and doing, canvassing for political positions, not just formation for the sake of formation and for transactional purposes. I also think that we need to evaluate the legislature. The legislature is there. Yes, it's an institution. We have seen it in and out. Many have come in and some have gone out. Some are still there. But the performance, has to be evaluated. And I think that apart from the cries that the huge budgets, that sustain the legislature, is a basic problem, for democracy in this country. Because if you calculate the budget, that is sustaining the legislature, we think that that money, should be deployed to provide services and provide facilities and welfare for Nigerians. But in evaluating the legislature, I think that they have tried in some way, at least rules or regulations, or bills, laws, have been passed. But the relationship with the executive, has been served, especially in the last dispensation, 2015 to 2019.
All right, Professor Dung Pamsha, thank you very much. We'll return to you later on in the course of this conversation. Will it indicate that we were going to be joined by another guest via Skype? We understand that the Skype connection is through now. That's, of course, was a guest that we've had from time to time. Professor Joy Ezilo, the Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria, Enugu campus. But she's joining us this time from Vancouver in Canada. So, Professor Joy Ezilo, pleasure to have you with us. We know that it's around about midnight in Vancouver at this time, and so you probably will be having a sleepy head, but quite clearly you're in the mood to contribute to our conversation this morning. Once again, welcome to the program, and shoot straight away, telling us what your assessment is of Nigeria's 20 years of uninterrupted democracy.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've come a long way so far. We are not yet there, but we are not alone. We know democracy in the world we live in. Half of countries of the world practice democracy, but from available statistics, less than 5% have full democracy. We are far away from having full democracy. But what is important is to measure our success or how far we've come using the maybe 4 or 5 cardinal pillars of democracy, one of which is rule of law, the issue of free and fair election, functional government, which is about transparency, and also rights and freedoms in terms of citizens' rights and to what extent they enjoy that. Of importance, the 5th pillar is one about political participation, which is inclusion of the citizen. To what extent do they participate? Because the simple meaning of democracy is democracy is the government of the people by the people. And that means men, women, youth, and everyone should be involved in that government. So if you look at all of these pillars, then we can begin to talk independently, looking at each of them, the extent Nigeria has come. With regard to free and fair election, we know it's still a challenge, but at least we've had the 5th successful election, which we can say, okay, we are on course. With regard to citizen rights, fundamental right and freedom, which there are many aspects to that, including right to food, right to dignity of persons, to life, security, and all of that. With regard to that, we are still having major challenges. On the issue of rule of law, which is independent of democracy, we still have a problem. Transparency, accountability, the functionality of government, to the political culture itself is problematic. But let's talk about participation. I think participation is key, is very central to survival of any democracy. And with that participation, half of Nigerians, and I mean women and youth, especially women, have been marginalized or have been excluded. Political representation of the female gender has declined over the years, and that retrogression is unprecedented, especially in civilized sociology. We have seen increased agitation for not just in Nigeria, for around the world. We've seen significant improvement, even in Africa, in terms of women's representation. And a very prominent, or the so-called giant of Africa, which is my country, Nigeria, ought to be setting the pace. But unfortunately, we've seen a steady decline in the number of women elected into political position, including for appointed position. And this is a major source, because if you look at the even more Ibrahim Index or the World Economic Forum Index, you will see that Nigeria is just beating about 9 countries. And this is sad that our own democracy is not engendered. It means also is in danger. And it means that we've excluded half of Nigerians, especially the potential they have, because I believe that women, not just because I'm a woman, have the potential to raise the quality of leadership. And democracy is about inclusion. So it is a matter of right also that the female gender should be included. Now that we have, after the 2019 general election, less than 6% representation of women in terms of women elected into the National Assembly and House of Assembly all over Nigeria. I think the government can only make up this by ensuring more women, that more women are brought in into through appointing positions. We have a national gender policy that stipulates 35%. We are very much off that mark. But in any case, we are even moving to 50%, as we've seen in many other democracies, including in Africa. Nigeria shouldn't be a laggard in any way. Rather, we should be setting the pace for others to follow. So there are a number of things, functioning of government, for any government to function, and part of accountability includes gender accountability. We need to work on that. We practice multi-party system. We have a number of political parties. We've seen through this election how far we've come in that direction, but still we need to now begin to ensure that political parties are really helping the democratic process and doing what should be their function, including civic education, political education, and helping to build a formidable democracy, because that democratic culture is yet to take root, and we all have a role to play in that, and the political parties in particularly. have a core role to ensure that this is happening. We're not seeing a lot of that. You can see from voided vote or that a lot of people are not doing the right thing, and the electorate are yet to get into the. So it means the political parties themselves are not doing their work. So in a number of areas, we have to make improvement. But I would say, to God be the glory, that's 20 years practice of democracy. There is a lot of room for improvement. It's not yet uhuru. Our work is far from being done, but steadily all of us can march and with inclusive government towards that goal of, I wouldn't even say full democracy at this stage, but that should be the aspiration, to have a full functional democracy in Nigeria.
All right, Professor Ezilo, staying with you just before we bring in the guest here in the studio. Malam Kabiru, who himself, of course, a renowned politician, teed off the fact that it will be suicidal, if any uniformed, men should attempt to usurp power at this time because of, the reaction that, the Nigerian people, that will come from the Nigerian people. Do you see that as mainstreaming the people within the democratic process? Is it part of an achievement that the people are now having an understanding of this aspect?
Yeah, it's in the aspect of, just take that again, I think there was a little break.
Is it part of an achievement that Nigerians now know, the value of a democratic, institution, democratic rule?
Yeah, no, Nigerians know that we are in a democratic route. That's it, one thing. But then the democratic institutions have to be functional, and the citizens have to enjoy their rights, which is the fundamental right and freedom is also part of it. And then within that, we also have our civic responsibility as Nigerians, we should take seriously. That as we march even to this march forward, we should be looking at even compulsory voting and making sure that people register and vote and exercise their franchise. We should be looking at things around patriotism, and we'll be because part of our problem is that we don't have enough patriotic Nigerians who will put the love of country first before their own personal interest. And we need to, that is part of democracy that we need to continue to solidify and work on. Civil liberties, of course, is all part of lack of political culture that is needed for the survival of our democracy.
All right, Professor Joy Ezilo, thank you very much. Let's bring in Abdullahi Mustafa, who is, of course, a Nigerian in diaspora in the United Kingdom. 20 years on for our democracy, what's your assessment?
Okay, first of all, I would like to say Eid Mubarak to my brothers and sisters over there. I think democracy is the best thing that have ever happened to Nigeria. Let me start by talking about the advantages. The most important thing democracy has brought to Nigeria is the right to vote. So we can't take that away. I mean, the fact that the people have the right to vote is actually enough. We can't dispute that. There are a lot of setbacks. We are not there yet, but we are going to get there. The definition of democracy, let me start by defining democracy. Democracy is actually a government of the people, for the people, by the people. So we will ask ourselves now, are we really a democratic nation? If we say yes, which I think is yes, what kind of democracy do we practice? Are we in? So for us to ascertain that, we will have to actually talk about the pillars, which one of our guests have talked about, which are the basic principle of democracy. The first one, we will be talking about the sovereignty of the people, the right of the people. How much have they been part of the democratic system? In that aspect, I would say yes, people have been part of it, but the problem now is that we have in Nigeria is particularly the right or the people involvement. Unfortunately, the politicians we have, they bring policies. The policies we have in ground is not really about how it affects the people, but how the policies win election for them. And which I think that has to change. I mean, the policies are supposed to be how will the people be affected directly, how it will change the life of the people, but not how, not what we're seeing now. I mean, most of the policies are really how will the Godfather, I mean, how much is it going to bring to the people that sponsors the political parties, or really how they win the election, which is what they focus on. The other advantage is accountability. I mean, we can't take that away because we during the dictatorship, during the military era, there is nothing like accountability. I mean, they do what they want, and they have their constitution. They are the constitution themselves. They are not being guided by constitution, but democracy has actually brought to us direction. So there is a lot of accountability, there's transparency. We see what they tell us. Even if they lie, they have to tell us what the funds have been used for. Another advantage, I think, of democracy, which we are enjoying, or we've enjoyed so far, is equality. I think people have been given right to participate. You've been given right to say whatever you want to say in the media. Anybody can come out and register a political party and participate. Well, the only setback in that is, I don't know, but I'm not sure if independent candidacy has been approved in Nigeria political system, because I've not seen anybody contesting independently. The political parties have their own I think restrictions. They are very, very expensive. One can't just come up and say, okay, because I have this policy that would change the people, and I want to stand. I mean, the first thing is, how much do you have the money? Can you buy the votes? Can you buy the even the ticket itself? The delegates have to be bought off. So, I mean, that's actually a very, very big setback. So I think we have to look at maybe the independent candidacy, because that gives everybody the right to come up with, to contest.
All right, Abdullah Mustafa, thank you very much. Independent candidacy, of course, will be a function of an amendment to the Constitution. And in the latest round to amend the Constitution, independent candidacy was proposed, but it was struck down. So it didn't pass through. So now you still have to go through the instrumentality of political parties, which is one of the pillars that Professor Joe Ezolo was talking about in terms of citizen participation, and therefore the platform that you use. I'd like to return to Professor Dung Pamsha in Jos. Professor Dung Pamsha, let's talk about this. Democracy is not an end in itself. So the question arises, in 20 years, has our democracy delivered the public goods? And if so, what's been the quality of the public goods that we have had in 20 years?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the functions of democracy is for actors who operate it, to deliver to citizens welfare, like I said initially. And I think that we still have a lot of problems, with this. A number of factors, can be adduced to explain why we have not seen, democracy delivery, on the promises of politicians and other actors who are within the center or the periphery, of governance. I think one of the points that we must mention is that for 20 years, we still have a lot of problems with health, with education, water, sanitation, very basic things that Nigerians, are expected to benefit, from governance, from supposedly, free democratic system which has been established. So we still have these problems. Nigerians still go to streams, to fetch water. Nigerians still just rely, on the personal or some private, individuals who pretend, to provide health services. Nigerians still go to those places. And so where are our health facilities? What quantum of budget goes to health? What quantum of the budget that goes to health is used for the delivery, of healthcare services? So I think that we still have problems in that area. Education. When my colleagues in ASU, when we go on strike, we do not go on strike basically or basically for pay, but we go on strike for the system to be improved, for our laboratories to have the equipment that we require, for reagents to be provided, for work to go on with students, for the system to get well grounded, and let us look at institutions that are giving out knowledge in the 21st century. We shouldn't be seen as institutions or like glorified primary schools or secondary schools. This is what we expect democracy to deliver. And I think painting this picture, one of the reasons that I think I would adduce for this poor attitude towards the delivery of services and welfare to Nigerians is the interests that is embedded in policies, interest that is embedded in the actors that take these policies, interest that is embedded in the execution of the programs and projects. I know that governments for the past 20 years have adopted one program or the other, but in terms of the performance, in terms of the fulfillment of the goals, we shouldn't be talking now of Nigerians still going to the streams, Nigerians not going to school. The federal government just revealed that they were unable, to take children out of the streets, for the past 5 years. So we think that there is a very basic problem, with our Democrats, who are expected, to work assiduously to deliver services and welfare to Nigerians. And we need to drum, seriously on and even bang the table sometimes to make the point that, look, we need things to change. This is a government who's talking about next level. We need to see the next level happening in concrete terms. We need to see people, being happy, that they now have a government, that will provide. So corruption has actually been a problem. The lack of political will even to deliver. When budgets are made, they are not really used for the purpose that they are expected to be used for. So we are still back, to talk and address, issues, of welfare 20 years after when we said the military was not doing very well. So I think that it's a time for us to evaluate very well and see how this present regime will take us to the next level.
All right, Prof, thank you very much. Again, let's quickly, just before we bring in Malam Shitu Kabiru here, Professor Joy Ezilo, you're joining us again via Skype from Vancouver. The fact that we're having this conversation about, 20 years of Nigeria's democracy, means, of course, that we assume that at 20 years, there are certain, landmark achievement. And if you compare, a 20-year-old and the quality of growth and development now, I want you to tell us what, in terms of quality and numbers, how far do you think we should have come now? And of course, are we, progressively, getting towards that point?
Yeah, in terms of course, the democracy we're all in agreement that we haven't scored very highly as we would like to, because 20 years is not 2 years. But we know also that even from studies that have come, and it's a bit of consolation, There are less than 5% of all the countries in the world have full democracy. By the way, we have about 50% practicing democracy, and that even some countries have dropped, even within 1 year, dropped, meaning that democracy is under threat all over the world. And that is also calling for action to strengthen and build institutions that are central to democracy. We have to think of, if we're talking of constitutional democracy, the principles of that constitutionalism being reinforced in practice, and the quality of the democracy or the functioning of government, having also the checks and balances and making sure that government work for the people, because the people are the ones that ultimately are supposed to be the beneficiaries of that democracy. But is it working for the people? It is not working for the people, because the issues that are so central to that, even right to livelihood is under threat, human security is a problem, and freedom from fear and want is a major issue. And all of that goes to the quality of life and what the expectations are of the people. So we all need to, especially the government, to be able to hold the government to account. And but the government or leadership is not one thing, because at all levels there is a problem. And it's not just at the level of even the government, so to speak, but also even at the level of private sector, even at the level of also the flowers. So is a work. It calls for a multi-pronged action, concerted effort by civil society, by also political parties. But what we have, and I repeat, the problem is that the country, there are very disparate interests, of course, and many nations within the nation state Nigeria. We haven't made the kind of progress we expected. In fact, think of rule of law and judiciary have never come under the kind of threat it's facing. It appears that a rehash of even back days of military, and we hope that all of this we can improve. But then we have things also to be happy about. There have been also recorded and major improvements in certain sectors, and we hope that going forward, that those areas that we've done well, that will continue to sustain that level. For example, today also Nigeria is a force to be reckoned in the world. We just had the Nigerian ambassador being elected as United Nations General Assembly President. We have a Deputy Secretary General in Nigerian, and we are holding our own in industry and in terms of the human resources capacity and contribution to world affairs. So we have people with capacity, the competence, and the character. But it's to find these people and ensure, not finding them. Some of them are even willing to serve, but the political patronage system is such that doesn't always bring out the best people that will put put country before self. And we need to go beyond that, bring in more the business of government. Is too serious to be left to politicians alone. And we have to, everyone has to be involved. Participation is crucial, and I repeat again, participation by the diversity of entire Nigerian society, especially women, is also crucial. And I hope that we can bring more youth, bring in more women into this government as they constitute the government, especially in appointment of ministers and other leadership, other position of power.
All right, Professor Izilo, thank you. Just before we take our tweets, I'd like to return to Malam Shitu Kabir. You earlier on talked about, and everybody, indeed, have also talked about our gains, from the democracy. But we've also had reversals, and that's why we see sometimes we talk about the huge infrastructural gap in almost all sectors. We talk about, in road, we make gains and then we revert to, to status quo in power, in health. In fact, some people say, look, whatever we have gained in the health sector is just mere, very marginal, from what they used to be. So what, as a politician, would you say has been the sore points?
For us, the sore point is that, one, as a country, we borrow the democratic process. We call it presidential system. And then we also borrow the economic system. As a nation and as a country, it is 20 years down line now. We must sit down and look at how do we fashion our own democratic process in line with our own culture and belief. And so also, how do we fashion our economic blueprint or economic process according to our own culture and belief. Why I say this is that we blame ourselves, we do. When you look at the presidential system of government as it's practiced, you have about 5 countries that practice this presidential system. And if you look at Nigerian context, we see some people are now calling for state police, state this, state that. You have the exclusive and the exclusive list in which the federal government are the whole owner of it, especially when you come into mineral resources, security and co. It is time we look at this area and look at what will benefit the state. If it is in the exclusive list, we take it out and be able to allow states and local government. And that is why I support NFIU and Nigerian Financial Institute, who says that let the local government fund go direct to the local government, because I'm now talking of economic, every economy process start from local government, because it is in the local government you have the land. It is in the local government that the citizens can now go into processing of their own product. It is the same local government that infrastructures can spring up. When we are talking with our man, you ask him, he said he lives in Manchester and he's very proud of that. Today, I cannot be proud to tell you that I'm from Efuru and I'm staying in Efuru. I will look at it, it's a bush. I should tell you I'm staying in Asaba or in Warri. So, because...
Efuru is not bush.
I'm just giving you...
Did you say Efuru?
I know Efuru in Warri.
Yes,
Efuru in Warri. I know I'm hitting at you. I'm hitting at, okay, Pretro. Let's say Pretro in Bayelsa State. If you want me to go further into the creek.
Mention one bush from your location.
Eh?
Mention a bush from your area.
Why?
No, so that people
okay, let's say from Gwagwa. Gwagwa in Abuja. If I tell you, yes, if I tell you today that, okay, I come here from Gwagwa, I feel why should I? People will say, I'm in Abuja. Where are you? I'm in Maitama or this. Why? Because we did not improve infrastructures of those areas and allow industries. Let's assume what we grow there is yam. The municipal local government will now take yam processing into Gwagwa, develop that yam plantation, and put up structures that I don't even need to be inside Gariki or Maitama. I'll be proud. I would like to stay there because that is where I get my daily income. Where I'm going, let me not digest from our discussion here. Where I'm going is that our economic blueprint from day one is wrong. And our political system is also a little wrong. It is time as a country that we come together, whatever and how we want to do it, and make sure that we streamline our own economy and political system. And I want to give you politically, if today you are talking of political parties, are too much at this, you have over 1,000 political parties in India. You have over 100 and something political parties in the United States of America. But what they did that we didn't do is that there are parties that are just on county, that is local government. There are parties that are for states. There are parties that are called national, which is Republican and Democrat. But every party in Nigeria want to be national party, want to contest presidency, until we bring a legislation where you say, let's assume you have 2 million followers. Then you can be confined to where you have that 2 million followers if it is within a local government. If you have 30 million followers, then you can now be called national political parties. Those are reforms that will also allow democratic process and then enhance political system.
All right, thank you very much for your points. Now, as my colleague Claire indicated, we have some tweets that have come in. We'll go through them now and then return to the guests. Dele Jack Solomon, 20 years of uninterrupted democracy in Nigeria is a long time to eschew high level of corruption in our system, fight poverty, replace decayed infrastructure, reduce unemployment, eliminate ethnicity and religiosity, and exterminate insecurity and other ills. These we must not fail to do.
Okay, Mike Ayako tweets that we gained a lot in the last 20 years of democracy. It's not a mean statement because of developments that include agriculture, road construction, education, telecoms, education, power, security. Democracy undoubtedly brings peace, unity, freedom.
All right, this is coming from Law Alpha C. One major gain of 20 years of democracy is the enviable and respectable status Nigeria is occupying in the international community. The signing of many bilateral agreements and MOUs for security, economy, and trade-related issues for general growth and development are examples.
All right, Festus Akiboyewa, I'm forced to really shorten your tweets because they are quite long. And as Kingsley will always plead, please make your tweets, short and, of course, precise. Festus Akiboyewa, your tweet is, democracy is alive, but members of our political class must remove desperation from our democracy and see politics as a public duty. That sums up your tweet.
Now, Titus Knock tweets, no nation develops without providing security. Corruption and nepotism erode the capacity of a nation to develop, hence insecurity challenges we are facing. Eradicate corruption and provide security and things will be okay.
And Motanat Farouk says, if the system of democracy in Nigeria is swayed, the cuts and ugly sides will certainly outweigh the benefit and the beauty. It says this is so because our attitude when it comes to discipline and sincerity, there's an inexplicable gap between leaders and the masses.
Mohammed Ibrahim, we can say Nigeria has come of age in democracy. It doesn't explain anyhow.
And Kejo Olagbeju tweets, the public service is still not responsive enough to deliver qualitative and fast service to citizens. It is the vehicle that delivers the gains, but more often are bogged down due to bureaucratic and self-opinionated attitude of the elite. We need public service reforms.
Now, Shuaibu Al-Khali, in 20 years of democracy, we give glory that a lot has been achieved, but our major problem today is insecurity.
And Dele Jack Solomon, again, this is your second tweet, and you've outlined what the dividends of democracy should be, and they include good governance, popular participation, unity, accountability, protection of freedom and freedom of information, human rights, and decentralization and devolution of power.
Cecilia Okoroma, I believe in Nigeria. With continuous democracy, Nigeria will emerge as one of the best countries in the world. Democracy is about inclusiveness, not tribal or mundane sentiments.
And Habila Kwarazakshi, we've achieved very little as dividends of democracy. We're still battling with unpatriotic leaders without interest in good governance, just like our former military heads that came to power through guns and bullets. We have a very long way to go as a nation.
Now, Comrade Ngala, in 20 years of uninterrupted democracy, we have little improvement in terms of development. Masses are still suffering, no good electricity, and corruption everywhere. So those are the tweets that we have. I just, of course, we have barely 10 minutes to wrap up this conversation. One issue I would like the guests to address. Again, let's go to the network center in Jos, and also perhaps via Skype before we come back to get the closing thoughts of our guests here in the studios, Claire.
Yeah.
Professor Dung Pamsha, there are some analysts who say that what has emerged in 20 years of Nigeria's democracy is that you have a president of the Federal Republic and then 36 emperors who are in charge of the states. And that this has created a situation where the political system is governed and dictated by oligarchs, which is why you have the challenges at the local government level, and you also have the challenges of governors dictating who becomes a member of the State House of Assembly, and the State House of Assembly are in their pockets, and then you also have governors dictating who goes to the National Assembly. The analysts argue that this is unhealthy for our democracy. If you agree with that view, how might these oligarchs be overthrown in terms of what we are seeing now that is unviable for our democracy? Make them real Democrats.
Well, I think that is an appropriate description of what is happening in our country. And this is basically because of the way the Constitution has been structured and framed, where powers, concentrate, in the hands of the governors, to the detriment, of local government councils, and so they decide, on their own what is good for them and to serve their own interest. And so that description actually fits, what is going on in the country, which is really unfortunate. It's not good, for hegemonic, actors to emerge in such a way that their behaviors, serves as negatively, towards the growth of democracy. If local governments, which we have, argued for, to become autonomous or semi-autonomous, to play roles that citizens that are within those local governments, would benefit. This is what we expect. I like the point that has been made, by the chairman of the inter-party union, that we need some form of restructuring. And so if we allow these local governments, if we allow states, to do their own thing and contribute, to the growth of this country, that is what is required. But these people who have this power do not understand that the power is meant, for the transformation of resources, for the transformation, of citizens, for political development to take place, for economic development to take place, for social development to take place. They do not think that, and they do not even have the idea that this is what power is, is meant for. So yes, that description is good. How do we change this? I think we need to look at the Constitution again. See how we can reduce the powers of states and allow local governments, to also have some powers to independently play roles which would help citizens at that level of government to benefit, from services and from the resources which are nationally generated and devolve to that level of government. I also think that we should have more roles played, by institutions which have been set up in the country. Why would the EFCC or the ICPC or other related organizations, not, I would use the words harassed those who have not been living up to expectations at those levels? Why would they continue to use power which is meant, for the transformation of our own society and for personal gains? So, like it has been said, corruption is the order of the day. Why would resources meant for citizens being kept, by a few, by the ones we call oligarchs, or by those hegemons, at the state levels? So we need to rethink, the Constitution, review it in such a way that those powers are reduced, and also to see how we can democratically share this power. I agree strongly with the view that our Constitution should be reviewed in such a way that we redistribute power, from the national to the state and to the local governments. States, should be freed to look at resources in locations where they are, and to make this available, for citizens to enjoy life. So I think that that's the way to go.
Thank you, Professor Pamsha. Professor Zilo, we would also like you to respond to that question and also to what Malam Kabir has somehow described as a homegrown model of democracy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I listened to those tweets. They've all made valid points. When it comes, I'm not very optimistic about this issue of, when you look at principles of federalism and in a constitutional democracy, definitely devolution of power is very important. Decentralization of government is important. We need to have physical federalism. I agree on the level of restructuring, but let us not have too much hope that if you give local government powers as we are presently constituted, that there is going to be some magic. Even if you give them more money, the corruption, the process of getting the people who are at that level is faulty. So we're not going to see a lot of any difference anyway. We have to take it as a whole, and we need to do a holistic restructuring and rearrangement of government. And the problem, the Constitution is very clear on federalism. Of course, that third arm wasn't fully developed, but if we are to practice physical federalism and then fight the big elephant in the room, which is corruption, the cost of running the government, cost of government is and governance is very high. There is inefficiency in the system. And if we're able to fight all of that and build institutions and then refocus again on those major pillars of democracy, the issue of rule of law, the functionality of functioning of government, the checks and balances, the separation of power that is there, the division of power and everybody doing their bit, then we're going to have a better government, an efficient government that can deliver to the people. Infrastructure-wise, we're way behind. And the divide between urban and regional is a double digit. Also between men and women it is. So we have to look at this whole system. I don't know how we're building so much hope that if you give more money to local government, then things is going to turn around. With what they have, I don't know whether any of them have done anything. Most of them have not been able to deliver. There are even local governments within cities where private companies pay money to. So we have to do a holistic restructuring of devolution of power, to up to that level, and then also think with the political leadership and people who get elected even at that level to assume that they work for people and that by giving them more money they will work for people. I think that assumption is rebuttable, highly rebuttable, and I don't expect any magic from there.
Professor Izilo, we would like to thank you, but just before we'll let you go, the rule of law as one of the pillars of democracy is significant. Now, applying the rule of law to the fight against corruption, isn't it curious that even though there are offenses that we can refer to as corruption, in the statutes of the various state governments, very little of prosecution by the attorneys general of the states goes on. Everybody's looking at ICPC and EFCC.
Yes. Yeah, because it's also part of the problem of over-centralization of government and then irresponsibility of state. Because when we talk about that and we look at, three of my colleagues, we recently published an article in African Journal of African Law, where we talk about unconstitutionality of security votes. And then, because so at that level, people don't think they are accountable. They can hold even the federal government to higher accountability, and they see themselves as not accountable. So within the states, there have not been any issue of attorney general even prosecuting or, for corruption purposes. After we all have criminal code, and even before the ICPC or EFCC, all those offenses, white collar crime, all of that 10%, they are all there, and the criminal code of every state criminalizes the issue of corruption. And you're right, like you rightly asked, how come that there is no prosecution at that level? So there is complete abdication. We have to, go back to that, look at areas and aspects of concurrent jurisdictions, with the legislative list, and make sure that the states are doing the right thing. They are not doing the right thing. The budget doesn't work for people. The budget itself is such a big mismatch. And then, of course, there's so much corruption at that level. So they need to do the needful. If also they give money to local government and the state attorney general can wake up and hold them to account, fair enough, because they have to do their work. They have the law, even without going to the federal law. They have the law at state level to fight corruption, but they are seeing it as federal government problem. And then because again, the federal government itself are taking over power in every aspect, states are beginning to relax and they feel like an appendage. So they have to go back and they can exercise the powers they have. So that's part of the problem. And we need to continue to strengthen those pillars. Importantly, the rule of law. That is crucial and that is critical.
Right, Professor Joy Ezilo, the pleasure is always ours having you join us on Good Morning Nigeria. We do appreciate you. So we want to let you go now to catch some sleep, and we'll see you back here when you do come back.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, then that was Professor Joy Ezilo joining us from Vancouver via Skype. That's in Canada. Let me come back to you, my last question, Mustafa. We talked about participation. For you, within these 2 years, how much has, have the youth been mainstreamed, into the process?
Well, I think if you talk about the participation, I mean, there are two participation. Is it participation in terms of the electionary system, or they contesting themselves?
How have you been involved in the process, in the democratic process? It's a whole wide spectrum.
Yeah. I think the youth, there is an improvement, I think, and there is still a room to open more opportunity, to give more opportunities to the youth. One of the biggest gains is actually the not too young to run, which the president has, I think he signed last year. So that has opened a big room for the youth to come into the political arena. In terms of, the youths actually personally have to do more work in themselves, because it's not just about the government. I mean, we have youth clamoring for, they want to be among, they want to participate, but if you call them, if you give them chance, I mean, we've seen some youths have actually, I will give you an example of a young person. It's not really a youth, but it's actually a young governor, which we have in Kogi State. And that's supposed to be like a role model for, the youths to actually see and come up. But unfortunately, from what we've seen or what I've had, from where I am, people have complained so much about his governance, and to the extent that the states are saying, give us the older people. We would rather...
It's not here to defend that, but you were earlier on, you were talking about, and I'd like you to be very brief, about diaspora voting, the need for diaspora voting and all that.
Yes, diaspora voting, I think it's going to happen. Because fortunately, and I would like to thank Mr. President for actually approving the Diaspora Commission, which Honorable Abike Dabiri is the chairman at the moment. And we met her, and she said it's already an ongoing discussion. Diaspora voting is very, very important because, like I said earlier, before this started, that we as the diaspora, especially in the UK, we have almost even more than 2 million citizens that are ready to vote. So I think it's going to be a very, very good achievement and a plus to the democracy to actually bring that number into the voting system.
All right, Abdullahi Mustafa, thank you very much for your contributions to our discussion this morning. And we also would like to appreciate Shitu Kabir Mohammed, the pioneer chair of Interparty Advisory Council. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And from Jos, we're joined by Professor Dung Pam Shah, is political science at the University of Jos. Professor Pam Shah, thanks a lot for your insights in our discussion this morning. Okay, now let's go over to our foreign desk for some stories.
The World Health Organization has reported the spread of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. and these appears to be increased with more than 2,000 cases recorded, and 2/3 of them are fatal. With complications by rebel groups which has restricted efforts by health workers to contain the disease, Eastern DRC is now in the midst of the second worst outbreak of the disease in history. Militia attacks have hindered treatment and complicated the United Nations response to the crisis. Mistrust of health workers by locals has also contributed to an acceleration of the spread of Ebola in the country.
All right, so that does it for us today. And Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank you for tuning in. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, continue your holidays in a happy mood. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. Thank you, and of course, have a wonderful Eid Mubarak.